Hi guys, this is Sabrina here. Welcome back to my channel. For today's video, I just wanted to continue kind of my son's journey. I wanted to discuss a little bit more about the induction period, which he has successfully completed. He is in full complete remission right now, and he's going through the consolidation period. But I just wanted to discuss some details of my experience and his experience of the induction period and kind of some of the bumps along the way. I'm not going to discuss the bumps. I want to do a separate video on the bumps for each phase as we're proceeding, but I'm going to give some insight on the things that have happened and the process. So the induction period amounts to approximately 4 weeks. That's usually how long they keep the children at the hospital, because during this time they really depleted him of all his Y cells. His immune system will be extremely compromised. So in order to avoid infections, then you need to monitor 24/7. And also, if there are infections that occur, they have a better chance of treating it and preventing it from happening, or at least address it as soon as possible, because infections can get out of hand pretty quickly in children with leukemia and compromising diseases. So the first day of hospitalization, of course, we had met the nurses. So the nurses change every day, but it's pretty much on rotation. And then we had met the doctor at the ER, and we met the primary oncologist at St. Peter's University Hospital in New Brunswick, New Jersey. And we had already met him. And then he was actually going on vacation soon, maybe 2 days after hospitalization. He was hospitalized on July 2nd, and he was there up until maybe the beginning of August. So that's the period of induction. So the first few days, it was more like explanation of the disease and trying to figure out which one it was, running some tests. He was hospitalized on July 2nd. We met with the doctors every day. And then on Monday, he had the first operation in which he had to be sedated in order to get a biopsy from the bone marrow, because they had to analyze the cells. So that was the first step. And of course, he did get some chemos. So there is a kind of like a schedule of all the chemos throughout the induction period. And it's the same for consolidation. Throughout all the phases, there's a scheduling, a pretty strict scheduling, unless there's any bumps along the road that delays the treatment, which didn't happen to him. Any kind of bumps in the road they experienced, which he did experience, didn't delay the treatment at all. But they were things that needed to be treated in the meantime. So on Monday, he had to do the biopsy, which it was absolutely horrific. I remember that was the hardest day for me when they had to sedate him. I was holding him in my arms, and once they sedate him, he became all of a sudden limp, and his eyes, there was nothing there. It was traumatic to me, feeling him limp on your arms. It was devastating for me. And that was already my first trauma, and honest to God, I think that's the worst trauma of this entire period. Each sedation is just terrifying. Especially the first one was like a big shock for him. He completely dropped. Anyway, so it was traumatic. I was crying constantly and everything. And of course, during this period also, there has been some drama in the family, I will have to say, but I want to discuss this in a separate video. Right now, I just want to focus on the treatment. So after Monday, of course, we're waiting for the results. The only thing I discover is that the doctor, by the way, there's 3 doctors. The one that kind of did the first biopsy was not the main doctor, was like the secondary in command, which is, like I said, so there's 3 main oncologists. So the second command, which is a woman, her name is Dr. Pearl, who's truly amazing, and she always cares for him in all sectors. And she stated that she couldn't even get a biopsy from the origin, from the bone marrow, but she had to go do a peripheral type of biopsy, so around the area, I guess, because the bone marrow was so packed of leukemic cells that she couldn't really extract anything out, and that kind of freaked me out, because just that shows how bad it was. And so that was terrible. And I have to say, the first week of induction was the most intense for me, because that child was full of bad leukemic white cells. He needed to get them out. They needed to kill him, and they needed to be aggressive. It was considered a high risk case because of the level of the white cells. And basically, what happened is that they had to, after doing the mass murder, they had to get them out somehow. So they would use liquids to, flush them out. And he was peeing constantly, and my son wears diapers, and it was just out of control. And unfortunately, because of that, he did have a yeast infection in the bone marrow incision. So that was the bump in the road. He still has the mark of the yeast infection, but the yeast infection was always superficial. Has never been more than that. And he got under control pretty quickly. But yeah, it was just I wouldn't say pretty quickly. It took 2 weeks to get it. Not It was already under control, but to get it to a place of no concern, it took like 2 weeks. Even into induction period, we're still on top of it. So that was kind of the first bump in the road, this infection that really we didn't need it, and I was very upset about it. But unfortunately, we cleaned them as much as possible. But unfortunately, the sweat, the fact that he was laying down so much, it just was inevitable. I felt it was inevitable for him. It was very sensitive in that area. And so that was kind of the first bump. The second bump was the walking. He had a big limping issue that caused in the bone marrow, and he refused to walk. He was afraid of walking. And then for the entire induction period, he really was struggling to walk. He was afraid of walking. He was weak. So the doctors did presume and suggest that it's a combination of things. It's the chemos, the type of chemos that have some side effects that kind of weaken the joints or cause pains on the joints and discomfort. The fact that he was often in bed in the first week because of weakness. Also, the fact that the leukemic cells were so packed in the bone marrow might have caused the bone marrow ligaments like inside to break. So basically cause some type of fractures that are not actual fractures, like inside the bone. Some ligaments they're like broken, right? So those need time to heal. And also they did an ultrasound, MRI, X-ray. They did all of that, and they discovered that he had a pull muscle on the leg, like on this side, which is the side that he was limping on. And they kind of presumed that might have been out of weakness over time when he was very leukemic. Because of course individuals with leukemia are very weak, and if they fall, and it causes harm because their body is weak. So they don't know exactly when that pull muscle happened, but that was part of the explanation also of the walking. So those were my primary concerns at the time during the induction period, the walking. During the third week, I was and the infection, of course. During the third week, he was having problems with constipation. He had not pooped for 10 days, even though with the Miralax and everything, it was just not working. So they gave him a laxative in combination with Miralax, and he started pooping like crazy. Oh my God, it was like crazy, poop, 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 poop. And after that, I guess he starts experiencing some stomach pains for gas, due to gas. So they had to give him like some drops that usually are used for newborns for when they have gas in their belly. So they did that, and that kind of helped, but it was terrifying. During that time was terrifying because he was so much in pain, and I hated that. I hated to see him in pain. My mother was there the first week. Me and my husband were there. I was there most of the week. He was there half a week. The second week, I switched because I returned back to work at some point, so my husband took over. And then the third and fourth week, my mother took over, and my father were alternating. So I trust my mother more than anybody, including myself and my husband, honestly, because she's more alert and she's more on top of it. So I was a little bit out of my mind, like I was not clear-minded. I'm pregnant. At that time I was pregnant in my first trimester still, and I was vomiting nonstop. I was very weak, and I was not eating. I was crying all the time. I was completely not in a good place. and then my mother was helping me. I will always be grateful for her because she really helped me a lot, and she's still helping me throughout. And I had to return back to work, unfortunately. So yeah, so I needed some coverage at the hospital. The nurses were amazing. I mean, the nurses got attached to him so much, and it's just that's one thing that I'm grateful as, despite this horrible tragedy, I have to say that we built a family at the hospital with the doctors and the nurses, and just a family that I've never expected and I never wanted to have. But I'm glad, I mean, I'm happy that I do have it, and they are accompanying me throughout this journey, because this child didn't deserve any of this. And I mean, no children, this is no child deserved any of this. My child is, there's no mean bone in him. It's just such a sweet child, and it breaks my heart that he has to go through that. But so that's pretty much the induction period. Expect infections, be aware of infections, be aware of constipation, and the walking. Now, in terms of food, children might get fixated on certain types of foods. Their taste might change. So each child is different. My son did not experience any of that. The only thing I experienced is they stopped drinking milk altogether. I don't know, he was not in the mood for milk. So that was hard to kind of give him the Miralax when he was constipated, because that's how he drank the Miralax in the milk. So I had to put in the bottled water. So yeah, so really I noticed that he, in the eating sector, let's put it that way, he was doing fine. He was eating a little bit of everything. He was not eating a lot, but he doesn't eat a lot to begin with. So he did lose a little bit of weight. I think throughout the 4 weeks he lost maybe 3 or 4 pounds. 3 or 4 pounds maybe. Hold on. No. He lost. I don't. I think I know in kilograms. I think he lost maybe 2 kilograms in 4 weeks. I mean, I don't foresee that to be a lot. I think it could be worse. Yeah, it's not good to lose kilograms in 4 weeks, but I would say that it could be worse. He got skinny. Yeah, definitely did lose some weight, and he had to be discharged in order to regain it. He did regain maybe the 2 kilograms they had lost. He regained them back during the consolidation period. Now, one thing I forgot is that because he was full of so high leukemic white cells, he was really watered like a tree, and he became so swollen because of it, and because of the steroids as well. And so the first week was absolutely unrecognizable. And I did show you some pictures from, there was one picture from the first video I showed you in which he was very much swollen. So yeah, that's kind of from the first week. So I would say the first week is that when he was very swollen, it was the hardest week. The second week was hard, but as the weeks progressed, it became a little bit better. The intensity of treatment did not be bad. It was not technically better. It was still intense, but at the same time, the days that were the most intense were the ones that they needed to sedate him. I needed to inject the chemo in his spine. So those were the most intense days. There was one chemo that I actually very much feared, and name is vincristine, which you will regularly get in the future as well. It will be coming back into the picture. I believe that chemo does create some pink pee, so don't be some of the chemos absolutely alter the look of the poop, look of the pee, especially the pee that becomes pinkish. So I think it is the vincristine, if I'm not mistaken. So don't be worried about that. They will explain it. You don't have to listen to me anyway. But I think that's what it is. So yeah, so I was freaking out about that when I saw pink pee. I was like, oh my god. And there's certain chemos that have so many side effects. Like, it's a lot. It's a lot of side effects. You look at side effects, I was like, oh my god, what the hell? Oh, now what? Like, you don't know what's gonna happen to this child. Like, some children react to chemos in a way that's very dangerous, and you don't know whether it's going to happen to him or not. You don't know until it happens, and that's the problem. And you don't know what to expect. I'm not a crystal ball. I cannot predict the future. So that's the problem here. Even though, yes, the statistics are the 95% of cured children, so there's a high percentage of cure for this particular disease. At the same time, do we really know for sure We can only be based on the statistics and the expectations, how the treatment is going, and so we can have a prognosis based on his behavior during treatment, how he's responding to treatment. Now, the fact that after the induction period he is in complete full remission, that gives a better prognosis. There are some individuals that don't get to full remission, so some children getting to maybe semi-partial remission. The prognosis, of course, for that is not, it's not negative, but it's not extremely, like, it's not the most positive outcome you can also get. The most positive outcome is obviously complete remission, which is what my son has. So of course, if your children have complete remission, the prognosis is the best. Now, I've seen and I've communicated with families where the children had partial remission, so it was not completely zero or undetectable, it was a 1 over whatever. So in that case it will be partial, which is still good. And they're doing well today, and the prognosis is still good. So that's what I'm saying. Like, it's as long as there is a degree of remission, I think the prognosis is still positive. But of course, the most positive outcome that you can possibly ask for is complete remission. Obviously, you want the best scenario of all, and that's what I was hoping for my son. Now, during the induction period, we found out the type of disease that he had. We found out pretty quickly, which was the ALL. We found out that it was B cell type, and we found out also the genetic component that caused the mutation, so genetic mutation, which is the most common. It is the most common genetic mutation. It's honest to God, I forgot the name of it, but it's basically the most common. They say it's the most common and has the best prognosis of all of them. I was terrified that it was a genetic mutation called Philadelphia, which is extremely, extremely dangerous. Let me see if I can find the name of this genetic mutation, because, I know that I had it. Let me see if I'm able to find out, you know, the type. Oh, yes. It's called the TELAML1. That's the name of the mutation. It's just the name of it. It's not AML because it's AML. It's just called like that. TELAML1. That's the type of mutation that it was diagnosed with. And apparently it's a chromosome. It's kind of the cell breaks. I think I'm just trying to read here. There are some notes that I wrote about it. But basically, it's the most frequent case of mutation among in the children that suffer from this type of leukemia. It's the most well known, it's the most positive outcome and prognosis. It's basically, it's two genes that basically in somehow they break and they go back together kind of to fix things, and by doing that they mess up the entire mechanism of reproduction of the cells. Now, this mutation is present in millions of people, but not always it translates into leukemia or it causes issues. It actually does that only in 1% of the population. So actually this mutation is very, very common, but it doesn't always cause problem. Actually, in most cases it doesn't, but in 1% of the population it does. And my son fell through the cracks through that particular group. So I was very pleased with the mutation. So basically everything that has happened during the induction period was in his favor, so there was no reason for me to feel negative in any way. There's no suggested that he wouldn't make it or anything. So I was starting to become positive. Also, I became more afraid about infection more so than the leukemia, which is strange. I thought that I would need to fear the leukemia the most, but guess what? I was mostly afraid about infections, diseases. My son actually not only got infection and he was not walking, and he had constipation issues, but also he did have some viruses. So he had influenza. So he had 3 viruses. One of them was influenza. The other 2 viruses are, I don't remember the actual scientific names, but basically those are colds. Basically the colds that usually children get at daycare, so that it's a cold. So basically that's what he got. And of course, for a immunocompromised child, it's dangerous. So they had to minimize the symptoms. The fever had to go down. So yeah, so it's just that the leukemia is leukemia. It is what it is. But at the same time, I think it's very dangerous when you're not managing all the side effects of treatment, because all those things that are happening, the infection, the viruses, are kind of complications of treatment, because they're depleting him of all his white cells, all of his immune system is absolutely compromised, and so he's left with nothing to fight all these infections, so he's absolutely defenseless. So he really relies on antibiotics and everything else and medication. So really, management of all the side effects of treatment are really the key for successful prognosis. Really, management and catching the infections early, making sure they don't spread, because if they spread, they become very complicated, especially when they reach the blood. It's absolutely lethal. It's absolutely so dangerous. So yes, they have to be under control. So that's kind of my summary of the induction period. There's much more that has happened during that period, but it's kind of irrelevant to my side. It's more drama in the family, especially for my I would say entirely on my husband's side of the family, and I will explain that in the future videos a little bit. But I just wanted to point that out, that was kind of like the experience of the induction period, in brief, to give you like an insight of what's going to happen with the things you're going to have to face. And if you're facing this phase right now, I'm so sorry this has happened to you and your children or your child, and everything's going to be alright. Just have faith and be alert, be on top of it. If they have diapers, the diapers are really the enemy. Making sure you change diapers every 30 minutes. Try your best to change this and put an alarm if you have to during the night, which I didn't do the first week. I will just collapse and it will leak pee everywhere. And I'm pregnant, so it was very toxic. So you just don't expose yourself to these things because it's full of toxins. I would say one of the things that I corrected was to put an alarm to change diapers throughout the night. And it is a big sacrifice, and especially if you're working, it is tired. But guess what? If your child needs it, it needs to be done, especially if they wear diapers. They're in danger because diapers hold so much bacteria. So, unfortunately, that needs to be addressed and taken care of. I'm trying to work with my son to get him potty trained right now. We're in the process of potty train, but potty train takes time. It's not immediate. So yeah, so that's kind of the one thing that we gotta do now, and that we're working on. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching, and hopefully this video is helpful to you. Please drop a comment down below if you're going through this, if you have experienced this, and what was your experience. I would love to know and have some feedback. Thank you so much. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.